Today we're going to speak about the new Pirates of the Caribbean. Uh,
You mean Paris
everybody,
of the Caribbean?
everybody knows that the Caribbean has been subject to piracy for centuries. Some of the most famous pirates carried on their trade in the Caribbean, and eventually the world got together and started monitoring piracy in international law. So they now have the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, and of course the Americans have not signed on. Now,
Well, does that matter that they don't sign on? I mean, we can still prosecute them and prevent them from traveling to countries around the world. What's this above the law shit with a criminal state like the U.S.? Like, let's prosecute them under the United Nations and the Hague. They are not above the law. And a felon, even though you got a felon running your country, he's not above the law of the international courts. He's blowing up fishermen in the goddamn international waters and sometimes in other countries' waters. This is horrendous, folks.
well, they allowed Israel to get away with it every time they stopped one of those flotillas. And by the way,
Well,
Palestine is a signatory to the law of the sea. It didn't protect them from an Israeli embargo and Israel stopping
this is
aid ships.
ridiculous.
So there appears to be no teeth behind any of this unless you're a Somalian and you're attacking ships, and the
Well,
ships belong to British, Israeli, American interests, and all of a sudden now they'll send in the jets, the warplanes, and start hitting your cities.
which is what Trump, I think, wants to do. He started accusing the Colombian president of being a drug cartel leader, and he's cut off the funding to the Colombia, where they provide funding yearly for helping in the chasing down the drug operations. Biden worked quite well with Colombia to curb the trade in drugs, and it was working. And now you got this loose cannon going around the Caribbean blowing up fishermen. One boat, one boat had the motor out of the water in distress. It couldn't go anywhere, so he just blew it up. And I think the admiral in charge of the Caribbean fleet resigned a couple weeks ago because he knows anybody following the orders of this POTUS will and can be prosecuted after POTUS is no longer in the presidency. And that is going to be a real problem. I think under Nixon got pardoned, and his justice person got jail time. Everybody got jail time that broke the law for Nixon. And there was dozens of them. I think there was 17 people charged and 14 or something like that got jail time. And that's coming, folks. You'll watch. Everybody that kisses the arse of this Captain POTUS is going to be doing jail time. And they may be doing international jail time because they're conducting illegal acts on behalf of POTUS in international waters. So I can hardly wait to see these prosecutions. And another question is, why wouldn't the U.S. turn over Trump to the international courts of the Hague once he's no longer president? He might have immunity in the United States, but he does not have immunity before the Hague. And we, as the free nations of the world, should impose our tariffs and sanctions on the U.S. to force them to cough up Trump after Trump is no longer president and face the Hague for war crimes, international crimes against humanity. And if the U.S. so wanted, we could have the Hague charge them with acts done to citizens and civilians in the U.S. as illegal acts of war. There's some food for thought. The Hague can prosecute pirates, and any parrots that work for the pirates can also be prosecuted. Prosecuted parrots and prosecuted pirates. Perfect.
This isn't the first time either that Trump has been involved in piracy involving Venezuela. Uh, Ships that were uh, going between Iran and uh, were seized, and
Yes.
1.1 million barrels of Iranian oil was sold. Believe it or not, the oil was bound for Venezuela, which doesn't seem to make much sense. But since both countries have oil, but in any event, the U.S. administration under Trump sold the oil and of course kept the money.
Oh yeah, sure. Why not?
To which the Iranian president said, "No civilization brags about stealing."
Well, Trump does. He brags about it all the time. He steals money from citizens of the U.S. and he brags that he hasn't gone to jail for fraud and extortion and every other crime under the sun. And this Epstein documents, they should be released, and they would have already been released if Trump hadn't manufactured a shutdown of government, which the book is out now from the lady that was the victim of Epstein, and I'm kind of interested to hear and see what's in that book, because it's very important that the world understands the crimes and the connections when the Epstein files are finally released. And they will be released unless Trump destroys them with absolute immunity from prosecution, because he can destroy it as President of the United States, and evidence is gone forever. Except the victims will produce their own list of people that were involved. So, yeah, we got some interesting times, folks. I really don't understand it. All I know is Venezuela and Colombia are now the target of Trump, and for good reason. He's been targeting with ICE Spanish-speaking people and brown-skinned people that look like they may be from Central and South America. And what he wants is to have an all-out land invasion in Colombia and Venezuela to make sure that there's a war, so there's no ability to hold an election in the United States. He's taking the war to the streets. The appeal court said he can use the militia to send troops into different areas, and he is now implementing a full-scale internal civil war against South and Central American individuals, targeting by skin and language. And then he's going to be putting troops on the ground in Venezuela and troops on the ground in Colombia, because he wants the oil that is there, and he needs a large-scale escalation of a war with boots on the ground to ensure that there's never an election next fall. And he will never be removed from power after that time. You heard it here, folks. That's my prediction. I can tell you right now, that's what all this pandering by the Pirate of the Caribbean is all about. He plans on putting boots on the ground in Venezuela. And he's moved a whole bunch of ships and forces into the area for that purpose. And that might be one of the reasons he's not handing Patriot systems over to Ukraine, is he wants to keep them for his invasion. That's just speculation on my part, but if there's smoke, there's fire, and with this, the Caribbean is under attack by the pirates of the Caribbean.
Well, the war crimes going around the world today are something hasn't been seen for a while, and perhaps it's due to the fact that people now get more news from the internet and independent sources. But you look at Israel strikes on Yemen; those are a war crime. You look at the Houthis attacking shipping; the rest of the world views that as a war crime. What they've done,
even bombing Iran while you're negotiating a deal is a war crime.
bombing negotiators in Qatar is a war crime.
You cannot trust the world policing force, the UN, if they're not going to take actions against these people. And that's a problem. Inaction, folks. When you turn a blind eye to crimes, it just emboldens the criminal to do more crime.
You have to wonder what the point of having international laws, rules, and conventions are if particular countries don't sign up to them, and other countries are allowed to violate them without any repercussions whatsoever. And you look at Iran and the sanctions against Iran, and you look at there's no sanctions against Israel. And
Well,
Israel,
the Iranian sanctions came about from Trump's first regime. He walked in and said he's going to break the agreement that the U.S. had with Iran because, of course, Trump wants the oil or the oil off the market to increase the oil cost around the world. But whatever his motive was, he broke international treaty with Iran. He is the criminal breaker of that treaty, and then he extorted other countries to have to follow suit with breaking the treaty. And that's wrong. And he should have been prosecuted for that or sanctioned or dealt with on an international level instead of capitulating and all other countries cowering to the United States under Trump. And that led to a lot of complications. And I don't believe Iran broke any of the dealings, and they dealt in good faith. And even when they were dealing in good faith in the second term, they were bombed while they were negotiating. So it shows that the international law has to take precedence over the two superpowers or three superpowers in the world being able to do anything and break any laws, and any of their underlings like Israelis can break any laws alongside of them. That has to stop, folks, and you're seeing the end result of it. And if you don't stop it, you will have World War III. And I do believe it's still time to act, and I think there's time to stop this bullshit. And it starts in the United States. The people of the United States need to remove Trump from power immediately. And there are many ways of doing that under U.S. laws, and they have to start doing it. When you're committing international crimes, you're breaking international law. We don't care if he's immune to your laws in the United States. And if you don't act as a U.S. citizen to take care of this problem, you are telling us, the rest of the world, that you do not care about international law and you're above the law, and that your president is above the law and you will worship him no matter what. So yes, there is a king of the United States right now, and his name is Trump, unless the peasants of the United States remove him from power. That is a fact, folks, and you've been weighed, measured, and found wanting, U.S., and the citizens of the U.S. have been found to be in support of this criminal felon. That's how he got elected. So if you're going to parade around the world saying you're more righteous than everybody else and you're above the laws, guess what? When you put a felon in power, you are nothing but a crime organization, period. And that's my stance.
you look at some of the parties who have been accused of piracy, it seems ridiculous, but the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society, otherwise known as Greenpeace, was sued for piracy because they were trying to prevent Japanese whalers from violating international law and killing whales. So
And they got jail time, didn't they?
well, I'm not sure about that, but what I do know is it seems like a lot less of a crime than hitting a fishing boat with a missile. You know,
Well, I mean, the
you
one
know,
fishing boat had the engine out of the water, and you could have boarded it, no problem. They can't paddle faster than your missile or paddle faster than your boat. Like, how ridiculous that they expect us to believe that there was drugs on board when you could have sent a boat out to help them, Their engine was broke down in the middle of the ocean. What the hell, folks? Like, that should see automatic life in jail for any and everybody involved. That includes the guy that pushed the button for the missile to be shot at him, to the captain of the boat, to his subordinates, and should go right up the chain of command. The general in charge of the Caribbean fleet should have been thrown in jail. Trump himself should have been impeached immediately impeached. The people should have taken to the streets and forced impeachment of Trump and locking the stupid orange bugger up. The pirate of the Caribbean should be behind bars for his act, period.
It's all about oil.
I agree.
You know,
Money.
Trump got away with seizing Iranian oil tankers in international waters and selling the. Yeah, I wonder what his piece was for selling the oil. You know,
Commission probably
well, hey,
in its cryptocurrency, so it's untraceable. And that, folks, is how it's being done. The untraceable cryptocurrency transfers to buy favors is making your crime organization in the U.S. very, very wealthy. And cryptocurrency was ultimately designed by a criminal organization to get around international money laundering laws and moving of money across international borders. And here you got the President of the United States, a convicted felon, knowing how nice cryptocurrency is, set up a couple of his own cryptocurrencies to move money and all around the world so that people can buy favors with never ever having to worry about being shown where the money went and how it was delivered and accountability. And that's why cryptocurrency and the fact that the Securities Commission has legalized cryptocurrency is showing that big money wants to move their black money around the world so it can't be traced. And that, folks, is why hot air currency is not legitimate currency. So any of you guys with Bitcoins and all these other cryptocurrencies, I'll be laughing the day that the market falls out from under that, because it's nothing but enabling and enriching criminal organizations around the world. And that should never have happened, and it should never be allowed to continue to happen. But that's my position on cryptocurrency. It is a criminal means of getting around the banking laws and the accountability of where the money went, how it was going to be moved to and from criminal hands to clean the money up. And now everybody that owns cryptocurrency is aiding and abetting criminal organizations. So you should be really proud of yourself. And now I understand why a felon would have been elected into president of the most powerful country in the world. Citizens like aiding and abetting criminal activities. There you go, I said it. Okay, back to what we were talking about, the Colombia being drug into this war with Venezuela and the U.S. to ensure that Trump never has to hold an election in the U.S. This is probably going to happen, folks, and you can see the staging of the war as it develops, and we understand that Trump has the desire never to be held accountable for his breaches of international law or crimes. The only way he can do that is maintaining power. And if you look at all the acts of the people under him and around him, they feel that they're above the law, and that means he's already talked to them about making sure that the U.S. is at war before October next year so that the elections can be canceled. So any more information on the ceasefire in Gaza?
shocker. The Israelis are still killing people. Who
Well,
would
they
have
never
thought?
stop. They
Who
never
would have thought?
stop. Who would have thought? They never stop. I mean, it's a joke that the media is saying, oh, there was a ceasefire and a peace deal. Like, there was no peace deal. Nobody signed it. And there was no ceasefire. The only one stopped firing was Hamas. And Israelis just kept shooting at whoever they want. And I read in the news that Trump is looking at sending U.S. troops over to aid Israel. Now, is that to aid Israel, or is that to protect the land deals that Trump has with Netanyahu? Because Trump can't trust anybody, so he's not going to trust Netanyahu and Israel to give him the land he was promised for his resort development. So he's going to send in U.S. troops to secure and procure the land that Trump and his associates want to develop in Gaza. And that, my friends, is why he's looking at sending U.S. troops over there. It has nothing to do with the implementation of peace or a ceasefire. It's to protect the assets he wants to lay claims to in the settlement or annexation of Gaza assets. And like Trump said, it's going to cost a lot of money they're going to have to pay back for all this development, or to that paraphrase in his speech when he was announcing the peace deal that was fictitious.
Well, he now has stated on his media platform, Truth Social, that there are numerous great allies in the Middle East and surrounding the Middle East that have strongly and with great enthusiasm informed Trump that they would welcome the opportunity to send their troops into Gaza to fight Hamas. Now, you have to wonder what planet we're on when, you're suggesting that, Arab countries are going to send in troops to fight alongside the Israelis to shoot up Hamas, and it's beyond any kind of comprehension whatsoever to think that, first of all, Israel's going to let in, foreign troops into Gaza for any reason, let alone to help them. And it's ridiculous to think that anybody dropping 2,000-pound bombs on anybody else needs help at all, right?
But it's a form of extortion. I mean, Trump uses extortion to get people or countries to do what they don't want or really do, and he extorts them with tariffs and threats and all these sorts of things. So to turn a blind eye to all these extortions and tariffs that are illegal according to the U.S. law is not a good thing, and countries should just ignore anything to do with his tariffs, I think, because they're illegal. And if you sign a contract or agree to his terms, you're stuck once the courts do finally strike it all down, or he's removed from power. They're not going to go back on deals, most likely. They may, but if they get a good leader in there, they may rescind or revoke any deals you're forced to do under extortion.
Well, one of the issues, of course, is some of the countries offered to send in, peacekeeping troops, but that's a lot different than sending in an active military. And Gaza, the territory of Gaza is so relatively small and has been flattened. And there's another issue that the media is starting to leak out slowly, is that the Israelis have been promoting various armed gangs of Palestinians to go in and do their dirty work and stir up problems within Gaza. And now, of course, you don't know, because we don't have independent media on the ground in Gaza, what is actually happening there.
Well, when you murder journalists, kill and murder the journalists by targeting them like Israelis have done, you silence any exposure of your military actions in the so-called military zone, which is dubious to begin with, because if you had a ceasefire, your military would have been removed from the scene, and it wasn't. And if you had a true peace deal, there would have been peacekeepers moved in immediately, and there wasn't. So Trump is full of shit on being a peace deal. It's not peace until there is peacekeepers on the ground. Bottom line. And Hamas would probably love peacekeepers in there, but they're being prevented from going to Gaza by, lo and behold, the U.S. and the Israelis are preventing a peacekeeping operation. And them alone are the ones causing it. If they remove their troops right now, peacekeepers could go in and start rebuilding, but they don't want that. And Trump doesn't want that. He wants his land deals. He wants business partnerships with the rich countries in the Middle East that will fund his development deals, so the money ends up in his pocket. He don't care about Palestine. He don't care about Gaza, other than it's a land development deal that enriches him, and he is going to use whatever military might to make sure that happens for him. And the West Bank is the same thing. Israelis are expanding their settlement procurement to the West Bank at the same time as they're doing the Gaza resettlement operations in coordination with Trump and his business partners. I don't see this as a good mix for anything. And to claim that you're going to have other Middle East countries move their military in, yeah, I can see them moving their military in to help divvy up the spoils of war. But is that going to be a lasting peace? I don't think so. When you're stealing all the land and the assets and pushing and displacing the people into hardship and trying to force them out of their own country, you know, it has to be a two-state solution. Palestine and Gaza have to be recognized as a state, and redevelopment starts from there with peacekeepers on the ground and no Israeli troops allowed in Gaza, period, or U.S. troops, because they've shown allegiance to land deals that are procurement of land that may or may not be legal. It's the spoils of war. And U.S. supplied all the military might to blow up all the buildings there. So, yeah, I totally dumbfounded why peacekeepers weren't moved in the day Trump said there was a peace deal. There should have been 10,000 peacekeeper troops moved in immediately, and then I would believe there's a peace deal.
Well, one bit of good news is, Carney said that if Netanyahu came to Canada, they would honor the International Court of Justice arrest warrant. Period. There was no waffling. There was no if whatever. It's just don't come here. We'll arrest you. Now,
yeah,
Pierre
but he
Poilievre
announced it in advance. He should have invited them over for a cup of coffee and arrested them.
Well, Pierre Poilievre, on the other hand, has been really silent about that, and in fact has been a strong supporter of the genocide. So
Poilievre won't even go get a police report done on him. The janitor at the Parliament has to have a police report on him, and Poilievre is afraid to go get a police report. Why, Poilievre? You got some criminal activity in your past you don't want known? Or you're associated with certain groups and people in your past that you don't want known? Security clearance is important, folks, and anybody running around thinking they're not requiring it to appease whatever, no, folks, we want to see that security clearance from PP. I mean, you can't go around claiming to be the leader of the opposition, making, siding with illegal acts around the world and not, turning a blind eye to the genocide in Gaza and the alleged genocide in Ukraine, and you won't go get a security clearance. This ain't the United States where we elect felons as our president. We do not want a prime minister that has a criminal record at all. So go get your security clearance, or maybe your party should remove you from leadership at the leadership review that's coming up. And believe me, conservatives, you better get rid of this guy because he will not go get a security clearance. And that alone should be justification for removal from your leadership. Nothing else matters but to ensure that we have people that honor the law and respect the law leading our opposition parties. Thank you.
It'd be interesting to look at, who's doing the dying during this alleged ceasefire. And
a lot of people.
But it's not the Israelis. And
No.
So when you're looking at who's violating the ceasefire and compare it to who's doing the dying, then it's like following the money. It's obvious who's violating the ceasefire.
Yeah. And I mean, they're aligned with the Pirates of the Caribbean, so they're relying on POTUS, Captain POTUS, to the rescue of all these war crimes in Gaza. And to buy favor from Captain POTUS, they do want to give Captain POTUS all the land that he can with beachfront property so he can land his pirate ships and his wealthy pirate buddies to reap the rewards of the war in Gaza or the expropriation of land in Gaza. Maybe Captain POTUS should be facing international laws of the sea. Just thought, folks.
The law applies to everybody except the criminals.
Yeah, yeah, that seems to be they've taken over the highest seats in the land and the highest courts in the land. And boy, if you're going to be Captain POTUS, you're doing pretty damn good when you control all the courts and all the justice. So I guess criminals are having a feast at everybody's peril. Arr, matey, where you bearing all your treasure, Captain POTUS? Oh, cryptocurrency, so you can't trace it. Don't have to dig a hole in the ground. Perfect.
Well, you gotta love the excuses. Apparently, the ceasefire drew various colored lines across Gaza, and of course, you can tell by the 95% destruction of every building, the lack of power, water, sanitation, food, that every individual in Gaza is supposed to know where this yellow line is. You, you know,
Did they
and
paint it, spray paint it on?
well, apparently it's the line at which they're permitted to shoot and kill people, and unarmed women and children. It's
Holy
insane.
shit.
They hit a vehicle
And
with a
I suppose
tank.
it's posted on the internet and nobody's got computers or internet or power to check where this yellow line is, eh?
And how are you supposed to ever find out about these sorts of things? When you don't have cell phones, computers, laptops. Uh, they know it's
It's a
ridiculous.
joke. Yeah,
They
it's a
know that.
joke. They staged it so they could indiscriminately decide when and where they want to breach the alleged ceasefire that was non-existent, not signed up to. Yeah, that's pathetic.
Unfortunately, what they need to do as well is they have to let in independent journalists so that they have,
They're never
uh,
doing that.
well,
The,
they don't
the
want to have
days of
documented.
independent journalism going into war zones has been shown that it's probably never going to be allowed because they record war crimes and nobody wants to answer to these war crimes after the altercation is over. Well, folks, we're going to hold a lot of feet to the fire because I think it's time the free world stood up and said anybody in Israel that breaks the war crimes goes to jail. We don't care. We'll hunt you down. And anybody in Russia breaking war crimes, anybody in Ukraine doing war crimes, anybody in Gaza doing war crimes, you're going to be hunted down. There should be bounties put on your hide, just like Trump put a bounty on the president of Venezuela, accusing him of a drug lord. Why hasn't Captain POTUS, put a bounty on war crimes to the Israelis, to the Ukrainians, to the Russians? No, he has a very low standard of what he calls criminals. He lets out sex offenders. He lets out some of the worst criminals in the U.S., gives them all pardons. I'm surprised he hasn't given Maxwell her pardon yet. What's the scoop there, And that's the world of the crime organizations that are going on, making nothing but money and making it harder and harder for honest people to exist in the world. I don't know.
Well, they want
It's
to they
my
want to
blood boiling.
they want to keep your feet to the fire.
Oh yeah, well they're doing a dang good job of it. So I guess, is there anything else we need to cover on this topic, or are we just beating it to death?
Well, I think it'd be interesting speculation as to when the CIA is going to ferment the revolution in Venezuela. They've already got the cooperation of the Nobel Peace Prize Committee by awarding the opposition leader, the self-appointed opposition leader, the Nobel Peace Prize. And I'm not sure how, that washes in their definition of promoting peace.
Yeah,
and
that's all.
and the thing is, it's all about the largest reserves of oil, proven reserves of oil and gas
In the
in the
world.
world, very close to the
And
refineries in Texas.
Trump has authorized the CIA operatives in Venezuela to go ahead with undermining operations to the government already, according to an article that I read a few days ago. So the
Yes.
U.S. has already taken proactive insurgent activities within Venezuela to try to undermine the government and to allow a landing party to land in Venezuela. They're setting it up through staging, is my understanding. And they've moved a lot of military troops into the general region, and they've moved a lot of their boats and military ships into the region for a landing purpose. I mean, it may be just like the Bay of Pigs, but they may get a foothold there because they do want that huge oil reserve and feel that they've got support from a lot of the opposition people and organization within Venezuela to put troops on the ground there. So this is going to probably happen. It's going to probably happen very fast. And they've already done the staging for that military operation. And that's why the commander resigned in that region, as he sees it as breach of international law, and his head could be held accountable after the POTUS, Captain POTUS, is removed. So, you know, there's a lot going on. It's going to be fast moving, and it's going to be a war against Latin-speaking people in the U.S. on the streets, which is continuing, and that's going to be a shame and disgrace for the whole U.S., and hopefully the rest of the world holds them accountable in the future and even now in the present.
Anyways,
So,
have a good day.
Okay, take care.
Yeah, talk to you later.
Subscribe,
Bye.
like, let us know what you would like us to discuss, and research. We do research this stuff as we go sometimes, but a lot of it's developing on the go. So share, like, and have a good day. Bye.
Subscribe to the channel, give us a like, and please share the video. And don't be afraid to share this commercial with your friends too. Subscribe to the channel, give us a like, and please share the video. Don't be afraid to share this commercial with your friends too.